Good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone feeling today? We need more youthful energy. It's a youth conference, so a little bit more energy. So my name is Tracy Mureithi, and I will be your MC for today for the first part. And
Hi everyone, I'm Giovanna. I will be your MC later today.
yeah, we are thrilled to welcome you here, and we're excited for today. We've been preparing for a long time, and I can't wait to see what the youth have in preparation for us. And yeah, welcome to the Refugee and Migrant Youth Conference for 2025 at Innis Town Hall. That's where you're at, in case you need an address of where you're at. And yeah, give yourselves a round of applause for being here and for showing up on time and being there for the youth. Yeah. So before we dive in, let's take a moment to do the land acknowledgement. So I'm going to read it. I don't know it by heart. We, the FCJ Refugee Centre and the Centre for Refugee Children and S4 Collective, acknowledge that we are gathered today on the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land, known as Toronto, is part of Dish with One Spoon Wampum, a treaty about sharing and protecting this land together. We recognize the deep and ongoing impacts of colonization on Indigenous communities and the systemic barriers still faced by racialized migrant and immigrant communities. As treaty people, we are committed to truth, peace, justice, and reconciliation, recognizing our shared responsibilities to honor the treaties and build solidarity against oppression. We invite everyone to learn about the Indigenous caretakers of the land and your own ancestral histories. A huge thank you to the University of Toronto for letting us use this space to host our conference. And now, before we get started, there are just a few housekeeping details. In terms of washrooms, when you go on to the lobby to the right, there will be a directional sign that says washrooms. Past the food area, go downstairs in the basement is where the washrooms are. And if you need accessible washrooms, please look for anyone with an FCJ tag, a purple tag, or an FCJ sweater or a hoodie, and they can help you, and it should be on the second level where you can use the elevator. And then please, no food in the auditorium, only water that is allowed. And if you need any other type of help, please look for the volunteers, and for sure they will help you out. And then we will have a networking break around 3:40 for around 30 minutes. So it will be a good opportunity to interact with people and also have some good food that we prepared. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the food part. So yeah. Okay. So let's jump into what brought us here today, which is basically our theme for empowering youth voices for systemic change. And we're here to talk about how we can improve access to education, services, and resources that the youth might need as migrant and immigrant and refugee youth. So our first presentation is going to be from the Youth and Access to Education program at FCJ Refugee Centre. And they'll be sharing phase 2 of their project, Building Pathways, Enhancing Access to Education for Newcomer Children and Youth. We'll also, I think everyone has a pamphlet of the agenda, and at the back or at the front, there should be a QR code where, in case you have any questions from any of the presentations, there's a way that you can fill out your questions, and they'll be answered at the end during the panel discussion. So yeah, and please welcome our first presenter, Stefan, the project coordinator.
Hi everyone, thank you Tracy. My name is Stefan. I'm the Youth and Access to Education Coordinator at the FCJ Refugee Centre. I've been connected with this project since the beginning of the two-phase model. And today we're presenting the findings of our second phase of this report. It's called, like Tracy mentioned, Building Pathways, enhancing access to education systems for newcomer children and youth. And just to give folks context before we get into what this report is going to be about, in 2016, the FCJ Youth Network started this report card assessing the secondary education system in Ontario and the transition pathways from secondary education into post-secondary education and what alternatives existed at the time. So since 2016, there were a lot of improvements in the system. When the report was published, a lot of the advocacy and materials addressed in the report that was designed by the youth from the youth network based on their lived experience was taken into consideration. And once it was implemented, there were a lot of positive changes. Some changes did not happen and some regressions at the time. But with the pandemic and a lot of rollbacks on funding, a lot of changes in views around migrants and newcomers in Canada, there were a lot of regressions around many of the advances that happened from the first report itself. So with this model and from funding from the Maitrey Foundation, we designed this report this time around to be produced in two phases with the intention of the first phase seeing what had happened since 2016 and where are we at in 2024. And then from 2024 to 2025, all of the recommendations that went into the first report, what has happened since then? Was any of the recommendations implemented? Were there any conversations around these recommendations? And where can we go from here now into the future? Because this project is funded for two phases. And in this second report, we've taken the time as a team to consider the factors within the system and what we've been seeing with folks that have been coming to the center in this past year. In the first report, we reviewed data amongst the clients. We asked them a bunch of questions that were designed by folks from the project, and that was reported in terms of statistics for the change makers to take that into consideration, because one of the feedbacks we received was if there's no data, we can't really put this into change. Now, the second report, you'll notice you might not have a full copy yet. We'll be sending that out with the thank you email for this event. But I'll go over the brief of that for us today, and you'll see that there aren't any data components per se. You'll see some numbers, some statistics, and some timelines of changes in the second phase report. And the intention around that is not to focus more on what the families are experiencing now, but how has the changes impacted their lives. So we don't want to keep collecting data and it not go anywhere. We want to see what are the positive changes in these people's lives, because oftentimes they're treated as numbers, and that's not what we want to focus on. And now taking it into the next step after this, like I've been mentioning a lot, we're doing this in two phases, but once this second phase is completed and this report is accessible to folks, we want to still continue this conversation with the decision makers, because some of the points that I will highlight today, you'll notice that changes have started, but they've not been implemented or they've not come to fruition. So we want to make sure before we conclude this project's period by December of this year, those conversations happen and a toolkit is out. So the conversations with the decision makers are in physical format and they need to do something about it. Okay, so on the left-hand side, I think for folks, you'll see the phase 2 report itself. And the way that this project was designed was to treat the schools how they treat families and folks who enter the system and pass through it. They're graded on different factors of their schooling process. So in this report, you'll see on the left-hand side, the phase 2 report and the grades. They're marked on 5 salient areas that were identified by the youth network members. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a comparison between this year's report, the second phase, and the past 2 iterations. So the ones in purple and blue is the phase 1 that was produced in 2024, last June. And the one on the brownish screen on the complete right was produced by the youth network in 2016. So if you take a look at the grades before we come and see what the salient areas are, you'll notice that some things have developed and become better, but a lot of them have stayed stagnant or gotten worse. The only two that have significantly made progressive change is anti-discrimination, and that's only in this past few months that things have started to change. So like I said, many things not yet come to fruition, but initiated. And supports. So more initiative from the schools and the different boards to learn about the different statuses of the students who are newcomers in their systems and how best can they support them internally, and understanding when they don't have the capacity for those support services, how can they reach out to community, navigate between the resources in their region, in provincial networking groups and other coalitions. So just to give folks a brief idea, Getting In focuses on all of the steps at the enrollment stage of someone's interaction with the school system. So it could be things as simple as collecting documents, getting those documents translated, speaking to the school staff, whether that's the teachers, the secretaries, the admissions staff at the school, the admissions office, sometimes the principals and vice principals are involved, and then also if it escalates to the level of going to the boards. So whether that's the school board that they're in, or if they need to surpass that and go to the ministry, depending on their level of education. That could be the Ministry of Education for elementary and secondary, or the Ministry of Colleges and Universities for post-secondary education. Now, looking at equitable participation, this focuses on once you've just completed that enrollment step, once you've completed the enrollment stage, what steps are being taken into consideration to make sure this individual student and then their family at large is being welcomed into the Canadian education system, welcomed into the school culture, and making sure that they feel safe and as equitably treated as their counterparts that might be Canadian or otherwise. Now, looking at anti-discrimination, this has a two-factor way that we looked at it. One is, what are the systems? So this could be the schools, the boards, the ministry. What are they doing to ensure that anti-discrimination is enshrined in policies and approaches in their school systems and structures? But also, what are they doing when there are instances of bullying and things that might happen at the school level? What are they doing and how are they approaching that conversation and mitigating that process with the families, the students themselves, and involving both parties in that conversation instead of easily defecting to blame the newcomer student? Because what we've noticed in a lot of the cases at our center is that oftentimes the blame, even if the parent goes through the correct channels of bringing it up to the teacher, escalating it to the vice principal and principal, the blame is deflected onto the parent, either for not following procedure or that the child who was the victim of the bullying or the discrimination was actually the perpetrator. So they don't even give the opportunity for a parent to understand that process of the complaint process and how to move forward. Then looking at support, this is more of academic supports and the non-academic and recreational supports that are provided by the schools. So in terms of academic supports, it could be things as ESL learning, whether it's provided on-site or in association with their class taking. It could be things like homework support after school or additional tutoring that is provided by the institution, connecting them with supports at the post-secondary level to librarian services and on-campus peer leader services that might be something offered through the institution itself and free of cost. And on the non-academic sides, and this is one thing that the youth definitely wanted to have included in the report, is while you're in school, you also want to enjoy life and you want to get accustomed to the integration process of being in a new country. Whether you're elementary age, post-secondary age, it doesn't matter. We want to have fun at that component of while we're studying. It's not just about grades. So what is being done for recreational activities? Are there any excursions happening from the institution itself? Are they able to cover these costs and work around situations where someone might not be able to afford it or might not have the immigration status that allows them to exit the country or go to a certain place if they're exiting the institutional parameters? And in terms of moving on, this is the one that has significantly stayed the same. We were hoping to see some improvements in this, but unfortunately, you can see it's a D minus, D minus, D minus in all three times. And the sad part here is that the folks, while oftentimes having a well-acting spirit, they don't really fully understand what the individual status holds. And we oftentimes see this with non-status families. And to give folks in this room an understanding, many people in Canada can lose their status, and there are many different ways that they can lose their status. So you could come here as a visitor, not be able to change your status or figure out what your regularization journey looks like, and lose your status by not keeping your a valid status. You could come here as a student, not be able to afford to extend a study permit just for the sake of getting a grade, or because something happened with your program itself, to be able to complete those credits, and then you can lose your status that way. If you come here as an international student and by chance there's a medical situation or a family matter, you don't know the proper channels on how to work through that with the school, and say you stop classes for one semester, you actually fall out of status by not keeping up the terms of your study permit requirements, and many people don't understand that about their own status itself. So these different examples just illustrate how complex the immigration system is here in Canada, and students and their families are, one, expected to understand this entire system just because of the fact that they're here as newcomers, but also schools are expected to know these systems when they're responding to folks and families in that journey of supporting them. And while they might come from a place of well-meaning, they might not give the right answers. Many of us who were involved in this project, myself included, at many different stages were misinformed on what our allowances were in this country, where we could go in terms of next steps, and how we can pursue further education or further professional opportunities. So that gives you a quick overview of the 5 salient areas and why and how we graded them in this manner. And if any of you are from organizations that work in the systems or work with the systems and change systems, this will be a good visual to take a picture of if you want to advocate with these conversations, because this is a way of showing data. We're analyzing different components of the overall system and how they interact and affect family lives. And in the report itself, we're giving the change makers and decision makers a pathway on how they can actually implement it. So it's not like we're just pointing out what are all the problems, we're actually giving solutions and telling them that yes, this is a possibility and yes, you can make the change. So give a couple of seconds because I see folks taking pictures, and I'm going to advance to our next slide. Okay, so I'm gonna turn this way just so I get the directions right again. So the one on your left-hand side gives you a visual of phase 1, what were the things we suggested as recommendations, and on the right-hand side, the left-hand side is phase 1 recommendations, and phase 2, what were the outcomes that we observed, and where can you go from there. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the list of all 5 salient areas and our conclusions on each of those topics. So it is kind of confusing to look at the left-hand side visual. You just have to follow the yellow line or the yellow brick road, and it'll take you to the Wizard of Oz. No, I'm just kidding. But you have to follow the yellow line and the arrow marks because it'll take you in the direction of each salient area and the recommendations versus the outcomes. I'm going to look at my sheet here because it'll be difficult for me to keep turning around, but you can follow along on the screen. So with the area of getting in, the recommendations, so just as a preface to that, each of the 5 salient areas have at least 2, but most of them have 3 recommendations that we made. So it's not too much, not too little, just sufficient for the systems to implement. So getting in has the recommendations of financial support and scholarships, cultural competency training for staff, and school policies and protections in terms of safe schools and equity policies. And in terms of outcomes, what we observed this past year was with financial support and scholarships, There are options for that exist. You have OSAP for folks who have the status to be able to apply for that. At elementary and secondary levels under age 18, it's covered under the Education Act for most immigration statuses to be able to access school fee exempt. But that means that everyone who's left out of those parameters have limited options based on their status. So folks who are not eligible for OSAP, refugee claimants, folks without status, folks in limbo or changing their status, they are expected to cover the entire cost of their post-secondary education, which makes things difficult. Even when you have programs like the Sanctuary Scholars Program at York University and Toronto Metropolitan University that our colleagues from S4 are going to talk about, the program itself does not have the individual capacity to cover the cost of tuition for all the students accessing that program. Yes, there is a scholarship. It's dependent on funding that is coming in from external stakeholders, but that means that there are only limited opportunities for folks to access that post-secondary opportunity. With cultural competency trainings for staff, it's not applied uniformly across every board. Yes, there are some schools that take the initiative on by themselves. Some boards have tried to implement policies, but we see a lot of the rebuttal around the conversation with unions, and if someone is with a union, they cannot enforce mandatory training. So sometimes it's a little difficult to make sure that bypasses those systems and gets to the folks that need it. And sometimes it's also the component of the schools not wanting these trainings to exist in the first place. Then with safe schools and equity policies, we noticed that there is lacking in cultural competence around that. Folks are not familiar with different cultures. They just group people into the visual groups that they can make them to look out like y'all are African, y'all are Asian, y'all are Latin American. Usually that's the conversation and how the approach comes like from schools, even if they think they're coming from a well-meaning place. Now you will have to turn around the loop and go the other direction for the recommendations with equitable participation. The three areas were campus inclusivity and support services, expanding support services, and holistic support programs. The findings with this area was that equity-informed spaces are needed. We need more of that on campuses, more of them in schools. These conversations need to be happening on an ongoing basis. It cannot be a one-time workshop, one-time presentation that is not sufficient at all. And with expanding support services, more statuses need to be included. Even with federal funding into projects that are for newcomers, the federal government views projects that they fund only for certain statuses. So you will see oftentimes protected persons or convention refugees. You'll see PR holders that have already got that process. Citizens are sometimes excluded, sometimes included, but you don't see refugee claimants and non-status very often. And with the area of holistic support programs, we have community collaborations to enhance inclusion and invitation. So you'll see these words pop up in different conversations. Oftentimes it's just inclusion, but the reason that we use the word invitation is you're inviting people into the space to discuss and formulate their own opinions and share it with the group without expecting it to just be a tokenism of inclusion. We're including you. No, we're actually inviting you to this conversation table, and we really want to hear your perspective. So that's what equity is, because inclusion just touches the surface of equality. Now, turn again around the loop, and we'll see anti-discrimination. The recommendations were to implement anti-bullying and anti-discrimination agreements, language support programs, and biannual cultural sensitivity trainings. This one has made significant improvements just in the last few months, something that we did not have at the initial time that we were collecting data for the first report. So in 2024, I think this one was May 16th of 2024, the current Minister of Colleges and Universities, Minister Jill Dunlop, was still the Minister of Education. So she was still working with the elementary and secondary levels at that time. And Bill 166 was brought to the decision table. It's called the Strengthening Accountability and Student Supports Act of 2024. It's an update on a pre-existing policy. And this made sure that schools had to have their individual policies and measures in terms of addressing bullying on campus, and it needed to be updated every 5 years. And as I'm saying that, I just realized that this is for post-secondary education, not elementary and secondary, so apologies for that. The third point on that, the one that says 4.6 million allocation from Ontario government to combat bullying, that's at the elementary and secondary level. So apologies for that mix up there. So the latter part was May 16th, the former part was November of 2024. But the reason that you don't see, if I look back at the previous report card, it's B minus, the score that the system got on anti-discrimination. It's not higher because some of the key core programs like the LINK program, the language program covered by the federal government has had cuts in this recent few months. And that has not only affected the ones that are accessible through the school, but also the ones that are for adults that are offered outside of the regular schooling system. So coming past anti-discrimination into the area of support, the recommendations there were enhanced multilingual support and resources, bilingual support staff, and comprehensive orientation and welcome programs. This one also had a significant improvement. We've learned of new programs that exist, and we've also seen some programs that are developing and trying to expand their eligibility criteria. So you'll see several digital resources exist. There are things that focus on curriculum, information, understanding the education process, digital learning platforms that give you free access to Brightspace, so you understand that forum of the learning space as well. But the downside is that these forums are often just either in English or in the two official languages of English and French. There are very rarely inbuilt plugins to change the language and translate it to the different languages that the families speak and need to understand information more clearly. Some of these websites, you can use the Google plugin or your browser plugin to use the translation app, but it does not, unfortunately, it does not translate the documents that are on these pages. So that's the downside there. With the area of bilingual support staff, there is no specific funding for this area. So it's up to whoever the staff is at these different institutions. If they speak another language and they're open to speaking to the family and facilitating that understanding process, you have that. If not, you just don't have that option there. Families are oftentimes expected to bring their own interpreters for these situations to better facilitate the support services with the institution. And with the welcome programs, this is the one that we've learned many new areas about. There are varying welcome programs and community resources out there. Many of them are offered through the public libraries. The only thing that you need in most of these places is an address proof. So it can be a bill, it can be your ID card. You can take it there and create an account. You don't need to disclose your immigration status. And the libraries offer many services through them. For an example, Toronto has this thing called TPL map that you're able to get discounts and go around the city to various attractions. There are two platforms we found out about. One that's offered through libraries across the country called Canopy, where you can watch documentaries, movies, educational videos. There are a lot of resources on there. And Canoe, which is a resource that gives opportunity to recreational activities. But that's the one that right now still just limits to two different statuses. PR holders who have been in Canada the last 5 years, within the last 5 years have had that status, or Canadian citizens, but only in their first year as being citizens. Now finally, to our last salient area is moving on. The two recommendations here were to have targeted academic and career counseling and bridging programs and pathways. Unfortunately, this is the biggest one where there is a lot of well-meaning, but not a lot of knowledge and resources from the stakeholders that are wanting to provide this information. So the things that we were able to see and find out that worked and had positive impacts were open houses and post-secondary supports. I can't recall the name off the top of my head right now, but one of the youth working on this area found out that George Brown College has can't remember the service, but they meet with students, it's free of cost, and they help assess what their academic needs are, what their academic goals are, and help them identify key programs that they can choose from. And this is beneficial in seeing that someone in the system is taking the initiative to meet your needs and meet you where you're at. With bridging programs, yes, they exist. There are many different varieties. Some have costs, some have status eligibilities. The two ones that are more broad range are the two programs, the Sanctuary Scholar programs at York University and Toronto Metropolitan University. Some other universities are trying to replicate that program. We don't have any substantial ones in mind yet, and there's nothing at the collegiate level in a similar fashion right now. And one thing that we did not include in our previous report that we wanted to make sure that was highlighted here, because we're doing this through our in-house access to education program called Uprooted U, which also informed the first report and the Sanctuary Scholars program formation, is we have folks who've completed their post-secondary education in a credential here in Canada, and they teach that course as the professor to folks who cannot afford or are not eligible because of their status to go to post-secondary education. And we are not a degree granting authority. We cannot give credentials, but what we've told them is because these courses are designed to have a course outline and assignments, and you get grades at the end of this, and sometimes a completion certificate if you keep up with all of your classes, you can take this into the process of PLA, which is prior learning, always mess this up, prior learning assessment and recognition. And this process, I don't know if it's just central to Canada, but when I came here as a newcomer, it was the first time I heard about it. It helps credentialize non-academic learning. So it could be from school, it could be from the workplace, it could be from lived experience. This can go into being something taken as a credential that can get you the requirements that you need going into further education. Now, just to quickly give you an overview of the conclusions on these 5 salient areas, and then I'll hand back to Tracy, is with getting in, I covered a lot of these points. The important things for folks to know is to know that the Education Act is your holy grail for elementary and secondary education. And if you do have precarious status, Section 49.1 is your go-to space. And if you want clarifications on that, it's the Policy Program Memorandum 136. And if you're unsure about some things with status, with address proof documents, the new memorandum for you to refer to is Memorandum SB 16 from the Ministry of Education. With equitable participation, what we encourage folks to do is understand your own status first and what the implications are living with that status. If you have kids, I know it's a difficult conversation to have, but it's better that they are in the know than in the exclusion, because a lot of folks who informed the information in the 2016 report did not know what their status was, and they only found out when they were finishing high school or at that time where they were going to take post-secondary education. So once you familiarize yourself with your status, you'll be your biggest advocate. You have these many resources that you can use. Get familiarized with projects like the Sanctuary Scholars Program. There is one big success we noticed, and why the grade jumped up in this area was the York District School Board, York Region District School Board. They piloted a program that was funded by the federal government called the Connex Newcomer Youth Program. And that brought settlement services, additional support services, and academic recreational support services to a few of their select schools in their school region. And they were able to meet with classes, so it wasn't just the newcomer youth, it was an integration of everyone in that class, and that beneficial support of having someone who has regularized status, someone who doesn't, just understanding the systems, the supports, and the way we can come together as community. It was a successful project. Unfortunately, they're not able to continue it until funding gets renewed, because it's extra capacity that they don't have. But they've published their report. I don't know if at this moment it's fully public yet, but we do have a copy of it, and they presented it at Ocasie's Youth Vantage Forum last year. So that's one good outcome from this area. With anti-discrimination, the two ministries are taking the effort there. Wherever we stand with our political alignment, we should know that education is a basic human right and it should be a non-partisan issue. So if you have anything that you would like to bring to folks, you can always take it to your ministers, your local MPs, your city councillors, your ministers of provincial parliament. By being a resident in that catchment area, that is something that you have as an allowance. You don't need to have the voting eligibility right and be a citizen to be a resident of that catchment area. So it is their duty to take care of every resident in their catchment. With support services, like I was mentioning, some of the websites I want to highlight is the Ontario Curriculum and Resources website. It's by the Government of Ontario, not by any of the particular ministries. That covers curriculum, it explains it, breaks it down, has educational videos and short clips on how to navigate the system. There's TVO Learn, that's another digital platform, and Desire to Learn, that's the one that has access to Brightspace for free. And with the non-academic resources, things such as food security banks and programs, FCJ Refugee Centre has a food bank map on our website that has different spots in the city that do not ask for status at all that you can connect folks with. The Fair Transit program from the city of Toronto, the TTC, that has been rolled out for, it's broadly rolled out now. It's not just for particular statuses. So if folks are able to support people who need that discount, that's something that there's allowance there. And yeah, the others I touched on when we went over the 5 salient areas. And lastly, with moving on, yeah, touched on all of the points, don't want to take up too much time, but moving on is something that we're learning as we go. FCJ has been working with folks with precarious status for more than 33 years. The Youth Network has been doing so for, I believe, more than 13 years this year. So if you're ever in need of some of those resources, you can connect with us. There are other groups that work with education, like the S4 Collective as well. So knowing the resources within your community and calling on them when you need, and also when you don't need them, but also have passed through the system, connecting with these organizations to pass on that information and support services is something good to keep in mind. And I think with that, it should be the end of this presentation. Yeah, that's the end of it. So thank you, folks, and I'm going to hand back to Tracy.
Okay, that was such an eye-opening presentation, and it shows that the changes that we as the youth want, there's someone who's listening to them and they can actually be done. Whatever we think is right in terms of education or any other system that we'd want, there's someone who's listening. So another round of applause for Stefan's project, please. So up next, we're going to shift gears and go into youth empowerment and anti-human trafficking. The Youth Alliance Against Human Trafficking will introduce their project, Pathways to Youth Empowerment, a survivor-centered approach for healing and support. This toolkit is designed to equip youth with strategies to protect, heal, and advocate for themselves and others. Please help me welcome Tenzin to present on the project.
It was a long walk. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Tenzin Kense, and I'm the Anti-Human Trafficking Youth Coordinator at FCJ Refugee Centre. I oversee the Youth Alliance Against Human Trafficking, and it's been so far 5 years since Youth Alliance Against Human Trafficking has been in existence, and I'll talk more about our work later. But overall, this toolkit is the product of the study that we did back in 2023. We did a study titled Exploring the Impact of Survivor-Centered Approaches on the Well-Being of Human Trafficking Survivors. So we did a study and where we examined the current service provision that the youth was experiencing, and we found out during the study that the services that they were getting were inadequate and were not addressing all the needs that they had. So based on that suggestions of the study, we came up with this toolkit designed to help the service providers to provide better services to the youth. Sorry, let's move on. All right. Human trafficking is a very complex and pressing issue that affects individuals globally, including right here in Ontario, right in our backyard. And this toolkit aims to raise awareness, provide vital information, and equip both youth and service providers with the tools necessary to prevent, identify, and respond to cases of human trafficking. Understanding human trafficking in various forms is essential to creating protective measures to protect the vulnerable population, particularly the migrant youth that we've been working with, and who are often targeted by traffickers because of their precarity. So for this toolkit, we have defined the youth as someone who's from the age of 13 to 25, but we do not exclusively work within the age range. We do let the youth self-identify themselves, but because of the study, we had some specific guidelines of how we were defining the youth. So we just took the definition of youths as someone being from the age of 13 to 25, and that's what we're going with for the toolkit and the study. So Youth Alliance Against Human Trafficking worked throughout the years. So the Youth Alliance basically provides wraparound services to migrant youth who are at the risk of experiencing labor and sex trafficking. We employ a peer-to-peer approach, connecting youth with others who have experienced exploitation themselves. We have a steering committee that comprises of individuals who have lived experience, youth who have lived experiences of exploitation, as well as service providers who work with youth. We have a youth-led preventative strategies, such as we have developed materials and information. We do workshops, capacity building workshops, info sessions on human trafficking, and we have some key initiatives that we have done throughout the few years that I will share in the next slide. And our basic vision is to make sure that survivors have adequate resources for their recovery, and we also want to have more advocacy-based approach, and to have better policies for the survivors. So yeah, some of the works that we've been doing in the past few years is, firstly, my favorite, the podcast. We have a podcast called Superheroes Without Borders. The name is very cliched, but it is what it is, and we love it. Basically, this podcast portrays the migrant youth and retells the story as a superhero rather than just being labeled as migrant or newcomer or refugee. We want to portray them as superhero and be the hero of their own stories, and they share the stories of their resilience, of overcoming hardships. So yeah, it's a series of 12 episodes. It's been released in English and Spanish so far. We are planning to expand that in more different languages. And yeah, it's available on Spotify and on our website if you're interested. Secondly, we have a Stay Awake campaign. So basically, we have noticed that a lot of recruitment of human trafficking takes place through online digital spaces. And we felt that there is an increased need of having more, I forgot the word, sorry. More awareness building on digital spaces. So we have done three campaigns so far in the past 3 years on spreading more awareness on human trafficking and how to prevent it. And it's also available on our Instagram and our website. And lastly is the study that we published last year. So it basically goes through all the challenges that the migrant youth who have experienced human trafficking have faced during the recovery and with regards to when they were receiving the services. Yeah. So the purpose of this toolkit So the toolkit is designed to educate, empower, and provide resources for youth, educators, and service providers to understand the realities of human trafficking and take action to prevent it, but most importantly, to deliver and prompt and adequate service with a survivor-centered approach. The goal is to offer practical strategies, tools, and resources for intervention to create a network of informed individuals and organizations that work collectively to reduce human trafficking in Ontario and equip vulnerable young population with the information they need to make informed decisions about their life. So what is human trafficking, you might be wondering. There are a lot of definitions out there on the internet, but what we usually employ with our work, it's the UN Palermo Protocol definition, which basically defines human trafficking as the recruitment, transportation, or harboring of people for the purpose of exploitation. So the protocol defines exploitation as including forced labor, slavery, sexual exploitation, and some common forms of human trafficking that you can find in Ontario is sex trafficking, labor trafficking, child trafficking, organ trafficking, and we particularly are very involved with sex and labor trafficking, and we do help survivors overcome in their recovery and also with their immigrational needs. So yeah, our core work lies in the importance of prevention. Youth, like I mentioned, are at a high risk of getting for human traffickers, especially migrant youth who have, based on the intersectionality, different vulnerabilities. So they might come from and towards LGBTQ plus community. They might be from marginalized communities. They might be they might not speak the language here. So that which often makes them more vulnerable and susceptible to being exploited by these traffickers. Traffickers often use manipulation, social media, and deception to exploit this youth. So that's why we feel that youth engagement matters, and that's why we have a steering committee comprised of the youth. We want to make sure that their voices are the one that driving the fight against human trafficking. So youth often witness human trafficking risk within their peer groups. Peer-to-peer education foster awareness in this way. We also have very strong emphasis on peer-to-peer mentorship. That's why, because it is one of the most efficient ways to address a social challenge. Informed service providers like ours also helps to build and offer essential support, and empowering youth enhances the safety and well-being of the community. So there are different impacts on a survivor of a human trafficking. It might be a long-term impact or a short-term. The long-term impact might be individuals, they might experience PTSD, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and economic struggles. And as for a community, it destabilizes the community and increases violence, strain, and create generational trauma. So therefore, we need a community-wide approach to address this challenge and work together to address this. So while doing the study, and we did a lot of qualitative interviews, one key suggestion that a lot of survivors have made was their need of support group facilitation or peer-to-peer mentorship groups, because although a lot of organizations that we know might provide it, but there are other organizations too that are lacking it, and this is just a guideline to have these facilities available for the youth. So creation of a support group. So support group facilitates the development of social networks. It fosters a feeling of community and serves as a source of sympathetic understanding. It also helps them reintegrate into the society and feel like belonging, because when you're being exploited and when you're out of the exploitative situation, you feel like you might be alone. So creating a safe environment is really important for them. Secondly, we can help them by having meetings, creating meetings. It does not necessarily be in-person physical meetings. It can be online, as long as there is a place where they can feel safe and secure and express themselves. So this group fosters empowerment, healing, and coping strategies. and to have navigate them through their different traumatic experiences. So we have set a guideline, which you can look at the toolkit. It's going to be more in detail. And this comes through years of service practice within the FCJ Refugee Centre, where we have a live and thriving youth network, and we have followed these steps and tried to create an inclusive and safe space for the youth through this. So one of the other key suggestion feedbacks that the migrant youth have given was accessibility of services. So accessibility of service, like Stefan has also mentioned, like it is very difficult for migrant youth to access services here in Ontario, and even within organizations, they have a length of different requirements for them to access those services, and they have said it is a significant barrier for their recovery. So we call for more accessible services throughout Ontario. So survivors face a lot of bureaucratic obstacles like strict documentation requirements that we are aware of. Those without regular status in Canada are often excluded from essential services such as language classes or counseling. Survivors with temporary status cannot access these settlement services for refugees, permanent residents, or citizens. So a lot of survivors who are without status here, they often get temporary status here, but they are unable to access those kind of settlement services like counseling or language classes. So it is a big barrier for them. So we have proposed calling for more flexible policies and policies. Yeah. So we such as accepting verbal attestation if they don't have proper documentation, or accept any temporary documentation, like an organization can attest, that this person is this person. So and we just accept those instead of asking for a physical ID card. Yeah, and also to implement a tailored approach. So everyone's need is different, and therefore we cannot categorize the survivors as just being in one box. We have to look at their different intersectional needs, and based on that provide services. So these are also some of the alternative solutions that we have come up with. So for example, having verbal attestation allow survivors to verify their identity circumstances through sworn verbal statements, provide temporary documentation, partnership with trusted organization, create a network of trusted organizations that you can partner with them, and through that you can provide services, and this in turn creates more trust within the system for the survivors. Have no ID service access points, and service waivers for immediate needs. For example, there might be temporary needs for like housing, medical care, and counseling. So waive those needs if they don't have the proper documentations. So by creating these flexible documentation policies, we can help them create services at different access levels. For example, basic needs such as emergency shelter or food requirement, we don't require ID. Intermediate needs, for example, counseling, job placement, and accept alternative forms of verification. Advanced need, long-term needs that they have, for example, housing or employment. So allow those survivors to have those flexibility of accessing these kind of services. We also call for flexible funding models to support undocumented survivors, prioritize survivors' needs over administrative compliance without financial penalties, broaden identification, verification, survivor-centered, more survivor-centered policies, and trauma-informed staff training. A lot of organizations are currently addressing more the need of trauma-informed training, and it is a positive sign, but we need this to be employed everywhere. For example, one might go to Service Ontario to renew their driver license, and you see the person having a really bad expression, and all of a sudden it can ruin your whole mood. Imagine that being a survivor, you go to access to these different organizations, and you receive a really bad service without a person knowing your all the background, and that can really create longer repercussions for them, and instead cause a negative impediment to their recovery. So one of the other key suggestions were that survivors, when they go to different organizations, they have to repeat the same story again and again in order to access those services, and it increases, it often re-traumatizes them, experiencing the same experiences again by recounting, retelling the stories. So we call for a more inter-organizational approach, where we come up as a united front. Organizations have a single service delivery model. So this is something that's not unique. It has been done in other sectors. The City of Toronto does it with housing for seniors, that they have one central system where the old person can go and seek housing. So like that, they call for a centralized system where they can go to one place and tell their story and gain those services, and they don't have to do it again when they go seek some other services or to other organizations. So some of the key benefits: it helps reduce service duplications and gaps. It also ensures all providers are informed about survivors' progress and needs, and builds trust between the system in general. And I would also say it also helps in saving cost, because when you do service duplication, it exhausts the resources that are already there. So you can instead use the resource for other things. So calling for more centralized model, and this is very idealistic. It is. We are not sure if it can be achievable when you're talking about such a delicate system, but we do have hope, and that's why we are calling for this. Currently, our organization is part of Toronto Counter Human Trafficking Network. It is like an umbrella organization, but we are more focused on advocacy and addressing the current needs of the current trends of the human trafficking that's happening in Ontario. So, but when it comes to service delivery, we can maybe in the future look into it. So we have some guidelines on how we can achieve this, but maybe in the toolkit, if you can see and explore it. So we call for having collaboration agreements between organizations and having central access points. So each organization can have a central access person that can be the contact point, and then they can have inter-organization communication and facilitate it more easily. And these are just some of the other protocols that we have recommended, like having monthly case meetings, having secure channels, make sure it's confidential, and like having point of contact system. So by enhancing this by having this collaboration, it will create an effective inter-organization communication, which is a critical component of survivor-centered care. By implementing integrated service models, centralized case management system, and clear communication protocols, service providers can create a cohesive support network that prioritizes survivors' dignity, safety, and well-being. It also creates a trust, and by showing a unified front, saying that all the service providers are unified and here for their recovery. Next, the survivors have called for a holistic approach, more empathy within the services that we provide. So holistic approach addresses the full spectrum of survivors' need beyond immediate trauma. It focuses on intersectionality, recognizing how multiple identities, such as language barriers, financial struggles shape every individual experiences. We also have developed call for a comprehensive needs tool assessment tool, which will help assess a survivor's needs comprehensively by looking into all the intersectional needs. So we call like survivors need different support. Some of them are essential. For example, food, clothing, housing, and we also call for trauma-informed care and mentorship. So looking at this, we employ, we use the definition of intersectionality, and it comes up a lot. We use the definition by Kimberly Crenshaw, and where we address the multifaceted challenges the survivor face based on the gender, race, immigration status, language barriers, financial instability, or lack of community support. And I think we all are very much well aware about how these different intersectionalities can impede a person's recovery. So based on that, we have come up with a training module, which is of four phases. It's just like a basic recommendation of what organizations can employ to have an intersectional approach. So the module 1 focuses mostly on foundational concepts of intersectionality. Module 2 addresses language barriers, and module 3 understanding socioeconomic challenges, and module 4 supporting survivors without a social support system. And to achieve this, we recommend having interactive workshops, because we believe that having more interactive workshops than going from like just non-interactive workshops is much more effective. And have an ongoing assessment. Try to reassess how your service delivery is being done, because no service delivery model is perfect, and with the help of feedbacks, it can always be improved. So regular feedback mechanism, and partnership with experts such as like academics, institution, advocacy groups who have like expertise over the certain subject. So we have called for a comprehensive need assessment tool that each and every organization should have when they're dealing with a survivor of human trafficking. This covers basically 4 components. The first one is mental health and trauma recovery. Identify the trauma-related symptoms, example PTSD, anxiety or depression, and immediate mental health needs. They have called for mental health because it is a very important part when a survivor is trying to recover, and those services might not be easily available or readily available for them. Just to know that they might need this service is really helpful. And second is housing and shelter needs. A lot of time when survivors are coming out of the trafficking situation, they might not have an immediate housing or shelter. So providing that can really help them with their recovery. And third is education and skill development. A lot of migrant youth come from like different countries and have different, they're used to different system, different culture, and just coming into a new place and trying to recover from the situation. It's really helpful if they can have, education and skill to make them more ready for employability. And lastly is help them provide employment and help them have an economic stability. And this helps them regain their dignity and make them feel as a part of society again. And within the same thing, language support is really important for a newcomer. I cannot stress how important this is, and especially for a survivor of human trafficking, just to come, who might be coming from different country and might not know the language here. Language is really key for their reintegration into the community, because a lot of services that they have to achieve, or shelter, or legal aid services, or employment, it all somehow like goes back to language. And when you're also providing language, it should be trauma informed, because teaching English to a regular class and teaching English to someone who's recovering from human trafficking is very different. So having that touch of trauma-based information would be really helpful. And having practical English skills, so they might not need to learn like the immediate rules of grammars. Instead, they need to. It will be helpful if they can learn the basic conversation of how they can access the grocery store. Okay, I'm going too long. Yeah, overall, it is a lot of recommendations that we have done. It's like almost 55 pages. It's a work of like years of work done by a lot of people, and we have given a lot of examples of how organizations achieve this. And not to be hypocritical, like we are trying to employ some of those, and those that we haven't been able to employ, we are assessing it and planning it to do in the future and see how we can achieve that. Lastly, calling for empathy and understanding in service provision. So like I mentioned, survivors have told me that during the interviews that when they were assessing the services, they had to face a lot of rude settlement workers, and which made them not share their story or assist them from seeking out help. So empathy is really important. Compassion is really important to help them recover, to help them walk them with their journey to recovery. So the core training area would be to have empathy training for all of the staff that in your organization, building trust with survivors, build the trust mutually and gradually, and using survivor feedback to improve services and practices. It is really important to make sure that their voices are heard and are central to the recovery process. And that's why we say it's really important to build those trust with the survivors, and you can achieve that by having consistency. Sometimes when the caseworker change, oftentimes they would have hesitancy over see that there's no consistency or within the organization. So it is good that if generally that there's the same person working with them throughout the recovery. Transparency, make sure whatever service you're providing is clear and transparent, and make sure it's confidential, because we are dealing with such a sensitive matter, and to make just the feeling of that the conversation that is going on is confidential really helps building the trust. And lastly is providing mental health support. And we have some guidelines of how trauma-informed care can be given by the organizations, but I won't go through it. I'm almost out of time. And yeah, lastly, one of the most important things that we found out through this study was feedback, because we thought that whatever work we were doing was okay, and most of the survivors that have given feedback are survivors who have taken services from us. And it was a very, I would say, a rude awakening, saying that we have to self-internalize ourselves first, and help other organizations also go through the same process, because there's a lot of imperfections in our service delivery, and we can always work upon it. So yeah, setting up a feedback system. Organizations can set up a feedback system which is regularly checked and implemented upon, and using those feedback effectively. Lastly, empathy and understandings are vital for providing effective support to survivors. By focusing on empathetic communication, trauma-informed care, and continuously improving through feedback, service providers can create a safe and healing environment. And organizations can start by empathy training, implementing trauma-informed care practice, set up anonymous feedback system, and lastly, track survivors' progress to refine those support strategies. That is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Tenzin, for presenting on the anti-human trafficking team. And now we're going to have our 25-minute networking break, and you can go have some good food that we've prepared for you. But please be back by 4 or 5, because the next project that we'll be presenting, the youth created a little bit of a movie for you, and you don't want to miss that. So please be back by 4 or 5 and go out there and talk to everyone else that you meet and eat a lot. Yeah, so thank you.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I hope that everyone got a chance to have a bite, have a drink, meet someone new, and re-energize, because we have some pretty exciting presentations for this latter half. I'm Giovanna. I am the Anti-Human Trafficking Manager at FCJ Refugee Centre and a youth at heart. And my colleague Natalia, she was supposed to MC today and she's not feeling well, so I am covering for her. I know that this is going to happen at the end, but this is a youth-led event, and I think that I just want to have a round of applause for everyone that's been part of this event, organizing it. And I know we're going to do that at the end too, but I think that it's nice to praise people, you know, along the way as well. So if everyone give a round of applause. All right, so we're going to dive into our next presentation. This one is from A Roadmap to Justice. It is a joint effort by FCJ Refugee Centre and the Centre for Refugee Children. This project is all about creating real systemic change in how migrant youth and children navigate the immigration settlement system. So let's give a big welcome to Tracy and Tash.
Okay, so we're going to start with a video instead. So I'm just gonna give a disclaimer for the video. In case you need help with whatever content is going to be in the video, we are going to include phone numbers at the end, just in case help is needed, and you can know where to access help after the video. So, and maybe dim the lights. Okay. I don't know if this mic is on. Can you? Okay, there we go. So, we've heard from experiences and voices of unaccompanied and separated children and youth who came into the country by themselves and had to navigate immigration and settlement support without support. And due to seeing these challenges reoccurring in different minors and different youth, the Centre for Refugee Children and the FCJ Refugee Centre chose to collaborate on this project, A Roadmap to Justice, and see how we can fill those gaps and also solve these challenges so that the next minor who's going to come unaccompanied doesn't have to go through this by themselves. And they decided to let this project be youth-led and have a youth leadership committee, which is made of youth who have lived experiences and have gone through the system by themselves, so that they can also give us the challenges that they went through and how they would like the system to be done better, and if they were to go through it again, how would it be done to be better for them. My name is Tracy Mureithi, and I am the project coordinator for A Roadmap to Justice and also the youth lead for the Youth Leadership Committee, and I'm here to present A Roadmap to Justice to you guys. So today we're going to talk about what this project is about, why this project matters, what are the challenges that we are seeing reoccurring in this unaccompanied and separated children and youth, and how can we solve this, and how can you help to make the system a little bit better and easier for them. So, as I stated before, A Roadmap to Justice is a youth-led project focused on improving the immigration and settlement system for unaccompanied and separated children and youth in Ontario, aiming to drive systemic and policy changes for a more inclusive and supportive future. So when we look at the reality for refugee minors, the statistics that we get from the Centre for Refugee Children is 150 to 200 unaccompanied and separated children come in annually in Ontario, and around 450 to 500 across Canada every year. And 70% of these minors report feeling unsupported during the whole immigration and settlement process. And 70% of these unaccompanied and separated children are living in the community with community members, which means some of them may not even have access to the right legal and settlement support, whereas 15% are in the foster care system and 15% are in shelters. So these unaccompanied minors in Canada face unique challenges, and without adequate support, they are left to endure extended uncertainty, emotional hardship, and significant systemic obstacles. So why must these support systems evolve? So Canada's immigration system was designed with adults in mind, leaving unaccompanied and separated children and youth to face unique challenges without having adequate support. And addressing these systemic gaps is essential to improve their legal outcomes, their mental health, and their overall well-being. So the goal for a roadmap to justice is to ensure that these folks, unaccompanied and separated children and youth in Ontario, have timely access to qualified mentorship, access to critical information, and individualized support throughout their whole immigration and settlement process. And we've been working on this project for the last 2 years, and what have we done within the last 2 years? So we collected data from minors and youth. Basically, we did interviews, understanding how their experience has been from when they landed to now. And we also did focus groups to also understand what solutions would they want for the specific challenges. Then we also did focus groups with organizations that serve this type of community. For example, Center for Refugee Children, which works with unaccompanied and separated children. And we got to hear from the staff themselves, what specific challenges are you guys seeing and how can we make it a little bit better for them? And then we did all the data that we collected, we analyzed it and did a data report, then developed a theory of change and created an action implementation plan. And now we are at the part where we want to implement the changes that the youth suggested. So the statistics in terms of the participants in terms of the youth and minors, 42% of them were from Africa, 38% from South America, 16% from Asia, and 4% from Europe. So we tried and covered everywhere in the world. And when it came to their ages, there were 24 unaccompanied and separated children. That is, they came in under the age of 18, and 31 youth who came in unaccompanied between the age of 18 and 22. So what are these challenges that we keep talking about, and what roadblocks are they? You have seen some of them in the video, and we'll be presenting some of them that we chose to highlight, but of course, the challenges are more than this. So I will divide the challenges into two parts, the immigration challenges and the settlement challenges. One of the main themes that we saw in terms of immigration was lack of information accessibility, limited youth-friendly resources tailored to their needs. Yes, resources are out there, but they are not youth-friendly, because I will go out there, for example, Google how to do a basis of claim or something, and they're going to give me a policy document instead of a step-by-step explanation for a 15, 16-year-old who just came in by themselves with no one to help them out, and we would want the resources to be a little bit more youth and minor-friendly. Then inconsistent communication between legal representatives and youth. We've seen this in the video where one of the youth mentions that they did not even find out that their claim was denied. They did find out their claim was denied by themselves without their lawyer even letting them know. This shouldn't be the case, because if she had a constant contact, someone who's there to speak for her, maybe a designated representative or an advocate or a worker, a caseworker who communicates with her lawyer, then this would not be the case. She would have gotten the right support, right communication. But because these minors are doing it by themselves, communicating with these lawyers, yes, we understand that the lawyers have a lot of cases to handle, but still, if she had a contact support, then would be a little bit easier to communicate with the legal representative. Then language barriers and lack of culturally relevant guidance. Some of the youth who come in, like one of the youth that we saw in the video, she did not even know how to speak English. And then you come in by yourself and you're expected to fill out documents that will determine how the rest of your immigration journey will be in this country, and with less to no support. And when it comes to culturally relevant guidance, some of the youth who come in come from places and backgrounds that you're not encouraged to talk about the trauma that happened to you. And for some of us, where we come from is, whenever you see a uniformed official or a government official, then you can't be open with them and tell them everything that you're facing and all the difficulties, and that's why you're coming and running away from your country, coming to Canada. So if you have someone that you can confide in, a designated representative, or even a caseworker who's like, I'm not part of the government, but I'm just here in this interview to help you out, it would make it much easier for these minors when they are going through the immigration process. Then another key challenge that we saw was complex immigration and legal procedures. Lack of support at ports of entry and critical moments. This is a story that I would give of myself, because I came in as an unaccompanied minor, and immediately after a 18-hour, 19-hour flight, you come in and I was separated from all other passengers and I'm by myself, and then you just get into an interview and I did not know what was going on. I'm confused, I'm scared, I don't know what questions they're asking me. And back home, if you're taken to a room with an immigration official or a uniformed official, let's say, you know you're in trouble and all that. But if I had the right support, if I had someone who's there who's like, no, they're not asking you all these questions for bad, but it's specific for you to be able to figure out your immigration process and figure out what you're doing here, it would have been much easier. And we've seen this reoccurring with very many minors. Then difficulties understanding legal terminologies used during proceedings. Most of the time, if you remember when you were 16, some words that are used in legal documents, you would not tell what it means. And if you don't have anyone explaining that to you, then it makes it harder for you to even make decisions that are supposed to be affecting your life, basically, in terms of immigration, in terms of going back home. Then harsh questioning and dismissive attitudes with officials causing re-traumatization. We saw this prevalent mostly in our interviews when minors go in for their hearings, and some of the board members are really harsh on them, not putting in mind that these are minors, these are 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds who don't even have to be going through this whole hearing process. Instead, let's submit maybe their evidence and do a paper-based hearing or do a file review process to make it easier for them. Some of the interactions that we had with the minors, there was someone who came in and was saying that the board member asked them, when they were giving their story, they're like, oh, did this actually happen? Are you sure you're not lying? If you ask a minor that and they're just coming from a situation where they feel that they're not well represented and they feel that they're not safe, and they're coming into the country for safety, and that's the question that a board member is asking them, of course it's going to be causing re-traumatization for them and later on leading to different struggles down the road. So if only you have the right support, if only you have to just submit your evidence and it's easier for them instead of going to a whole hearing like an adult would, then it would be a much easier process for them. Then I will go through the settlement challenges. So housing instability. Of course, we all know housing is an issue in Canada. So, but for specific minors, for these unaccompanied and separated minors, there is inadequate shelter options. These minors are coming into the country, you're given central intake's number or you're given a shelter list and you call them and they don't even have space for you. And some of the shelters will not take minors under or youth under a specific age range. So you're left homeless, like one of the youth that we saw in the video who was sleeping in the park for a whole week. And that's a minor who's not able to figure out her own life in a completely new country where she has no support. And some of them were even stating that they were taken to adult shelters that you see the type of people that you're living with. I'm a 16-year-old, I'm living with 30, 40-year-olds who have mental issues, who have drug addictions. And I just came into the country very innocently. I don't even know, I've never done drugs back home or anything. But this is the type of environment I'm put in, then that needs to change. And we understand that Canada does not have a lot of shelter options specifically for refugee minors, and that does need to change. In terms of discrimination and stigma, again, we saw it with one of the youth. You go in, talk to a landlord, I'm looking for a house, but well, you're not Canadian, you're from a specific background or you're a specific race, and they're not going to give you the house for that. And in terms of stigma, they're like, what's your status in Canada? I'm a refugee. Then you don't get the house. So that's also another challenge that we saw, and it can be easily navigated through having the right support. And then inadequate income and financial aid. Of course, we know how much Ontario Works gives these kids, and it's not even enough to get an apartment or even sometimes a room. But we need that to change so that it's easier for them to find housing options. And then mental health struggles. Lack of access to mental health services and culturally competent support. These minors have come from war-torn countries. They've come from families that don't support them. They are already traumatized, and they are looking for help in terms of their mental health. But some of them will have to wait months and months to talk to someone. Some of them will have to be they are given referrals to general counselors and general therapists who don't even understand what they're going through, who don't even understand this is the refugee process, this is why they are here, this is all the steps that they'll have to take. So sometimes we'll need to be a little bit compassionate in terms of those in the mental health sector. Please be more informed in terms of what are these minors going through. There are some minors who went to see therapists and they're just given general advice of being like, oh, it will be okay, just be positive. You're not telling a minor just to be positive when they've come from a worse situation than they have. And some of them, like one of the youth that we saw in the video, they say you go to a therapist and all they do is give you medicine, medicine, medicine. And that's not what you need. It's not even better for your mental health. It's even making it a little bit worse. So that does need to change. And then family separation and social isolation. Of course, as a minor, or 16-year-old, let's say, you're coming in from a country where you're used to your parents being home, supporting you. You can always talk to them about any issues that you have in terms of emotionally, if you need advice or anything. And then you're coming to a completely different country where you have nobody to speak to, nobody to confide in. Of course, in terms of mental health, you won't be doing well. But we do have some solutions for that so that it can make it easier in terms of separation and social isolation. And then difficulty integrating to school, work, and social environment. Some of these minors will have to go back to school, of course, but you're going to join a system where people already have friends in school. They already know what's going on in school. But for you, you've been put back to a different grade that maybe you are not in. And these teachers and counselors at school don't understand the process in terms of immigration, what you're going through. So most of the times you're very stressed in terms of immigration, you still have to do school, and they wonder why you're lagging behind in terms of school. Because you don't even have the right support in terms of immigration and school. So we need a little bit of collaboration from schools and teachers to understand what specifically is going on. And to wrap up on the challenges that we've seen, we have a whole action implementation plan that's around 70 pages with all the challenges that we've had, and that's just the top of the challenges. So I'm going to read a quote from one of the youth during the focus groups and the interviews. Mentorship and support. Having a third party present throughout my immigration and legal proceedings to support, like a social worker, would make me less scared in making decisions and speaking out. Basically, all we are asking for is a little bit more of support and policy changes where we can have some changes and make it a little bit easier. And this is not just, changes for now, but it's also to make them and give these minors a way to transition into the larger community more easily than it is right now. So I'll have my colleague Tash present on the solutions.
Thank you so much, Tracy. With all that being said, we were able to come up with solutions from minors and with all the committee that have been working on this. My name is Sudai Sekaja, and I will be presenting to you the solutions. Don't mind the cartoon. So we were able to group these solutions into two, the immigration and the settlement. And as you know, a minor goes through all this, the immigration first, and then this minor has to navigate the settlement process in Canada. Therefore, first and foremost, enhance access to clear multilingual information through their immigration and settlement journeys. This is a solution that must be put in place. A minor comes into a country that is completely new, and they need to navigate this country. But they find the information at the points of entry not adequate. Therefore, we need to put this information that is adequate. Maybe a QR code whereby they need to scan and get more information. Remember, these decisions they are making at the points of entry are going to determine what they are going to face throughout their entire journey. Another solution that is really, really important is to advocate for the presence of trained social workers at the points of entry to ensure fair treatment and informed decision making. You come in, you're a minor, 16-year-old, you are terrified, by the way, you are worried, you're coming into a country you have no idea about, and all the decisions you're going to make at that point will determine what you're going to face. Therefore, we need experts at these points of entry to help these minors come up with decisions that are worth it, and they are going to help them go through their entire immigration and settlement process. Another solution is to adapt fair review processes or evidence-based hearing to reduce re-traumatization for all these minors. No one wants to leave their country. That is it. But at one point, you have to leave your country. That means you have a lot on your mind. You are scared. You don't know where you're going. You just trying your luck. Therefore, you reach at the points of entry. After doing all that, you have to face a judge. Just by the mere hearing the word judge, a minor who is 16, 17, you are worried. Therefore, we are advocating for a file review process. Let the minor write each and everything that he or she feels like is going to help them through this, their judgment. And let them express what they think is right on paper, and therefore let the judges, based on this evidence submitted, to give a way forward. It's really hard for someone to face a judge when you are young and you expect this minor to express him or herself correctly. And this is going to affect their journey throughout the immigration and settlement process. Another solution is to guarantee extended DRs, designated representatives, to support after turning 18 until their process is complete. I remember we interviewed a minor, and the moment he turned 18, the DR was taken away. Turning 18 does not mean that my mind has changed. I'm still a minor, but I have turned 18. These DRs have helped these minors to navigate from step one, and removing these DRs when they turn 18 make these minors, everything changes. I'm going to do all these processes by myself. I'm going to navigate this by myself, and that affects their journey. So therefore, we want these minors to remain with their DRs until the process is complete. With that being said, that is the immigration. You are done with the immigration. You need the settlement. You need to come and settle in this country, which is new to you. You are 18. No, you are 16 and 17. Therefore, we are able to come up with solutions. And remember, these solutions also come from minors and lived personnel, because the people on the committee also lived this experience. Advocate for refugee minors and youth shelters and transitional housing. A minor who is 16 is taken to a shelter of adults. This minor is coming in contact with people who have a lot going on in their lives. Remember, he is a minor. He's going to copy whatever he's seeing in these shelters. We need shelters that are specifically for minors. Let them have the home away from home. We need them to feel that they are in a place where they are appreciated and looked after. Therefore, we are advocating for shelters specifically for minors. Another solution is increased financial aid for minors to match their current prices. Yes, we shall say that the government is trying to provide something, but whatever the government is providing is not enough. We shall not take away the mere fact that the government is providing, but a minor who is 16 is not going to be able to work and sustain he or herself. Imagine getting something like 800 from the government, and you have rent, you have to sustain yourself with this harsh weather. It's really difficult. And again, this is affecting the minor throughout their process. Another solution is current culturally sensitive counseling services and mental health resources. Yes, a minor who comes from a country, for example, a minor in the video, he came from Sudan because of a war. He's already traumatized and he needs a therapist. But because the therapists think that most of the times they generalize the trauma, they generalize their medication. Minors need specific handling. However much you are a therapist, we are advocating for specific therapists for specific minors. These minors need their own therapists who are going to understand and have maybe lived experience to carefully navigate these minors through their processes. Another solution is collaboration or collaborating with schools and community organizations to strengthen integration. After a minor coming into the country, he or she is going to think of going back to school. But these schools are made for people who are here already, and I'm a minor. They don't understand that I need special attention. We shall not blame the schools, but we need the schools now to come on board to understand that these minors need special care. They need to understand that these minors have been in a very different country and now they're trying to navigate something which is new, and therefore they need to look after them knowing that they are minors. With all that being said, we have solutions. Like my colleague said, we have like action implementation plan of around 90 pages. But we were able to generalize all these solutions into one major solution that we think will make an impact on the life of the minor throughout their immigration and settlement journey. Mentorship and individualized support. What do we mean by this? Emotional support during legal and settlement processes. We want to have specific therapists for minors. Let minors have therapists who understand, and it will make more sense if these therapists have lived experience. Therefore, you are talking of something that you know really exists. You are not assuming, you are not thinking that it's made up story, but you know it exists. Minors are suffering and they are not getting their problems solved because therapists generalize. Another important under mentorship, we want minors to have representatives to connect them to resources and opportunities. Some have been lucky to get around with you guys because you have connection. But a minor who is at the point of entry and now trying to navigate everything, they don't have support. They don't know what to do next because they lack people who are there to connect them to resources. So we are advocating for a specific group of people to help minors and connect them to important resources. Another important solution is helping minors feel less isolated, i.e., or that is to say, through peer mentorship. For example, a minor coming to FCJ. FCJ let someone be there who is a minor and has gone through the same process. I being a minor and talking to a minor makes sense. And if I was able to navigate this entire process, and I talked to a minor that, you know what, I came in like you, I went through the court proceedings, I had someone to help me, I was able to find shelter, I'm working, and I'm now okay. This makes a lot of sense. You know, this gives hope to a minor that, you know what, I can also make it. But you, a minor, you're coming into a situation where they are all adults. They tend not to give you what you really need. Or you think that since they are adults, they won't understand what I'm going through. But having minors who are there to help these minors makes a lot of sense. So therefore, who do we want to partner and collaborate with? We call upon each of you, the legal clinics, immigration bodies, refugee and shelter organization, mental health NGOs, legal communities, and school boards. All these sects, as presented here, have a hand in the life of a minor. At one point, he or she will need the legal assistance. Legal clinics will have to consult or go through immigration bodies, like we talked of the shelters, health in terms of their mental health, local communities. These minors live with us, so we need to come on board. And school boards, as we said, that these minors need special attention. Therefore, all these sects, we are advocating that these sects come and collaborate or come in partnership, and will make these minors feel at home away from home. With all that being said, what do we want you to do? Each of you took time and came here within this harsh weather. So therefore, there is a call to action. Please and please amplify the voices of the unrepresented youth. This is our role, our responsibility. We have to make these minors feel welcomed. Collaborative partnership. We are calling upon each of you to collaborate with us. We might have limited knowledge. You might have an idea that is going to make these minors feel welcomed. Community engagement. As I say, these minors live with us in communities. And it starts from the community to make these minors feel welcomed. Therefore, community engagement is crucial. Protection of children and youth. It's our responsibility. It's our duty to protect these minors because they are minors. And remember, they have trauma. And therefore, protecting them and caring for them makes them feel welcomed and more secure. Advocacy and policy changes. That is what we are doing. Most of you think that what we are doing is our responsibility or duty, but it's call for action. We want this to change. And there are policies that we think they must, the government must do some amendments. And civic engagement. It's all upon us and each and everyone who is here to make these minors feel welcomed and be engaged in whatever they are doing. Therefore, these minors will be able to navigate the immigration and settlement processes in Canada. With all that being said, these were the members that were able to come up with the data you have seen. As therefore I conclude, I call upon each of you in partnership, either in partnership or volunteering or just mere talking and amplifying the protection of these minors to make them feel welcomed and maybe implement the future immigration and settlement processes. For more information, you can contact our project lead, who is Tracy. She has more information, or one of the members of the committee. And with all that being said, I would like to say thank you.
Hello? Is it on? You can hear me? Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Tracy and Tash, for that very inspiring video and presentation. You can really hear the passion in your voices. I can tell that you're passionate about the project and also dismantling the systemic barriers that exist. I think we need you at the next rally speaking. Next time we're out on the streets protesting, you two should be there. Okay, next we do have another presentation. We have S4 organizations sharing their work on Sanctuary Scholars, a project that explores innovative ways to make post-secondary education accessible for youth with precarious status. So please welcome our final presenters, Elizabeth Barrera and Janina Fernandez Santos. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced names. Please reintroduce yourself if I did.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Are we all set? Amazing. Hi, folks. My name is Elizabeth Barrera. I am the current executive director of the Sanctuary Student Solidarity Support Collective. If you can say that 10 times really fast, I would be really impressed. But we're just here to talk to you a little bit about the work that we do, as well as some of the potential solutions and why spaces like these are really important. And I'm just gonna ask the panel to introduce themselves really quick. Janina, you're really close to me right now, so I'm just gonna pick on you.
Hi guys, my name is Janina Fernandez, and I'm an active member of X4 Collective, and I have lived-in experience as a sanctuary scholar. I'm also committed to bringing holistic ways and changes to a Sanctuary Scholars Collective.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Corral Rodriguez. I am also a member of the S4 Collective. I am a PhD candidate at McGill University in Montreal, and as a member of Sanctuary Scholars and having lived experience, I am hoping to leverage that into academic spaces and enact policy change through advocacy by my research.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatima. I'm the project coordinator of S4 Collective. For me, the space is very important because I've someone with lived experiences and I want to make sure that I'm able to help out others, to inspire others, and letting them know that being in a situation, you're not alone. So yeah, that's a bit about me, first year TMU student, yay.
Woo! Woo!
But yeah, that's all from me.
Whole bunch of scholars. I love it. Okay, so we're just gonna get started. Some terms to remember. I know that there have been a couple of mentioned about refugee youth, undocumented youth, and this is kind of the vocabulary that we like to use at the S4 Collective. We like to refer to folks who are facing less than permanent immigration status as facing precarious immigration status. So that means that you are either undergoing a refugee claim, or your refugee claim has been denied, you become undocumented for whatever reason. We know that the immigration system is very, very hard to navigate sometimes, and sometimes folks will fall into the cracks. So we use this as an umbrella term to protect our community. That way we include everybody who is facing the challenges of the immigration system. For us as well, the word sanctuary scholars is anybody who has faced any sort of barriers when accessing education, depending on various intersectionalities. It could be because of your race, your gender, your immigration status. And this can refer to anybody who would like to access education, no matter what level. So a lot of the times we support folks who are in post-secondary. That's their major thing. But we have also supported family who are either trying to enroll their children in junior kindergarten, elementary school, secondary school. So this comes across all levels. Permanent status just refers to you being a permanent resident or a citizen, as well as a conventional refugee. That means that you're not currently facing barriers with your immigration status. You can access the services that are provided by the government, and you don't necessarily have to go through the hurdles and when you have precarious immigration status. Semi-permanent just refers to folks who have some sort of semi-permanent, like it said, on the documentation. So you're either facing, you have a work permit, you have a study permit, but you're not as a permanent resident yet. And then undocumented folks is anybody who has fallen into the cracks of the immigration system, who cannot present themselves with current documentation to access services within the city, the province, or the federal government. So that's a little bit of the terms that we will mention today. And we just wanted to bring this up because we know that language is very, very important when you're talking to youth. And these are languages and words that we have chosen to refer to ourselves as. So yeah, keep that in mind as we go on. Oh, I pressed the wrong button, I apologize. All right, so who we are, or who are we, if you wish. As I said, we are the Sanctuary Student Solidarity and Support Collective. We actually became a collective back in 2018 when the first cohort of Sanctuary Scholars started at York University. It was super, super exciting to get to hear about the stories and the necessity to have these spaces for us to come together, because although it was super, super exciting to have the opportunity to attend post-secondary, if you are a service provider, you know that in the province, as a youth or a scholar under the age of 18, you have the chance to enroll in school, regardless of your immigration status, if you are in primary and secondary education. But we face a lot of barriers when we want to continue and go beyond secondary, when we want to go to university or college. So when the Sanctuary Scholar program started at York University, we decided to create a space for us to come together and not only cry about exams, as I'm pretty sure majority of you have done, if not, that's just me, but also to find ways to overcome the barriers on campus and to show solidarity, as well as to find solutions for us to gain agency and, have a space for us to come together. Like I said, this is a group led by migrant youth, so all the projects that we have done, our current panelists, myself, we are scholars who have faced or are currently facing precarious immigration status. So that's really important for us because that means that we get agency on this type of work that we do, as well as how we lead the projects. We truly believe that our personal experience is just as important as in academics. In fact, it leads a lot of the work that we do. So for us, it's super, super important to create these kind of spaces where a lot of the times maybe when you're facing or when you're undergoing an immigration process, you're told that your experience is not validated or you don't feel validated when you're talking to your lawyers or service providers. For us, it's very, very important to hold these values of saying your experience is just as important as in academics. So that's one of the main values that guides our work, as well as being for community, by the community. Like I said, we are working. We are the ones working on the projects. We are the ones developing the projects. So that means that we get a lot of agency and power in what we do. And we are a support group, majority of the time, if not all of the time, for Sanctuary Scholars like us who are currently undergoing some sort of process in the immigration system or who have transitioned into permanent status. And it doesn't really matter what intersectionality you find yourself in. We're always welcoming new members. You do have to have lived experience, but it's really, really important for us to create that kind of space for folks to come together. So that's a little bit about who we are. Like I said, if you are a service provider, if you have been through the education system here in Ontario, actually, how many of you graduated high school here in Ontario? Can you raise your hand? Amazing. So you probably already know, like I said, that you do have the right to attend school regardless of your immigration status. That means that you can enroll at any time. As my colleagues who have presented before, there is a lot of barriers when it comes to access to education, mostly barriers, not knowing how to navigate the system. A lot of the parents right now have experienced a lot of barriers post-COVID when trying to enroll the kids in school, which has made it worse for folks to get the resources that they need. Once you graduate high school and you're looking for options at the post-secondary level, we kind of hit a wall being like, well, I did everything right. I got my grades, I joined extracurriculars, and I had the dream of attending either college or university. And then we're, faced with the, you're not allowed to go, which kind of sucks. And it's very, very jarring to be in this kind of position, to being told no when you see your peers move on with their lives and there is a rupture in your either way of life. You don't get to live as any other student. You either have to go into the workforce right away because you have to pay your bills, or you have to look for other ways to sustain yourself, or you have to look for other options within the post-secondary education. But there is also a lot of barriers as well. I think Stefan mentioned it really, really nicely. Although these projects or the Sanctuary Scholars Program has been implemented at York and Toronto Metropolitan University, we have tried with other universities. I'm not going to name the one. But sadly, it's not an easy policy to implement. A lot of colleges, as well as we've been in conversations, but it does take a lot of time. So it is a lot of work, and we do need a lot of support, but it's really great to have sanctuary scholars lead these kind of projects, because we know what we need within these spaces. We know what needs to be done. We know the kind of barriers that we have faced, and we know how to overcome them better than anybody else with the help of support systems or our friends and our communities. So that's a little bit about access to education. A little collage about what we have done. I like to call ourselves the jack of all trades, mostly because we do a bit of everything. We've done a lot of workshops on access to education. We host our annual What's Next night, where we invite sanctuary scholars to come and talk to current and previous sanctuary scholars. I feel like, Janina, you have been in there. Fatima, you have been in there. Andrea, you'll probably be in there as well. But it's really fun because we get all these really, really excited high school students being like, what do you mean I can come and do high school and do stuff after high school? Personally, that was just me when I found out, but whatever. So it's super, super exciting to have the youth lead these kind of projects. We also do a lot of legal knowledge workshops. We have a toolkit that I can share with you at the end about access to resources when you're potentially facing CBSA or interactions with police, as well as landlords. We believe that if you know your rights, then you are your best advocate, and everything else is just extra. What else? Oh, we're currently working on a really important project. It's really, really fun. It's called the Borderless Access to Education Project, in collaboration with Justice for Children and Youth and Black Creek Youth Initiative. And we're basically just looking at what my colleagues have talked about in the past, the barriers to education within Ontario. We're currently in our third years, and we're currently collecting a lot of data about what folks are facing, potentially barriers. I would talk about it, but it would be literally just reiterating what my colleagues have already said. We need more access, we need you to listen, we need you to provide us the platform so we can fight the system. So that's always fun. We also do a lot of our projects. We like to open up the space for different forms of self-expression. Oh, Fatima, you did one last week. Would you like to talk about your workshop?
If you put me on a spot like this, sure. So last week, I hosted for the S4, like our bi-weekly meeting. We have bi-weekly meetings where like anyone who has lived experiences can come in and just have like a little bit of fun, just like create a community so these people don't have to feel lonely, or if they maybe don't have anyone to talk to, they can just like be part of the group, part of the meeting, and just like forget about what's going on. So what we do, we host like different kinds of workshops. We did a skincare workshop that Janina hosted. I'm gonna put you on the spot. And I hosted last week an art like workshop where like you scribble a line and then you have to come up with what this line represents. And it was very fun. I was hoping that everyone was like able to get out of like the box and like think out of the box, and it went really well. Everyone had fun. Everyone was like able to come up with like very, very weird, wacky stuff, and it was just a lot of fun. And I think hosting these workshops, especially by the youth themselves, is very valuable, so that then the youth are able to like feel part that like they feel like they are creating also like their little corner inside of this, inside of these meetings.
Yeah, so as you can see, we basically do a whole bunch of everything. And the main reasons why we have these workshops is the fact that we just want to feel like youth. We don't want our struggles to be centered around our personalities. We want to feel like we belong. We want to have the ability to make mistakes. We want the ability to go to school just like anybody else. And I feel like a lot of the times when we are in other spaces, we are meant to highlight our traumas more than anything. But I would also like to highlight our resilience and the fact that we're just like any other student, and we want to keep that up. We want to keep the feeling that we can make mistakes and live our daily lives just like anybody else. So you have already been introduced to our panelists. I wanted to make this a little bit more personal, so I asked my colleagues to choose a little symbol that represented them the best. I don't know if any of you would like to talk about a particular symbol that really calls to you, Janina, Andrea, and Fatima, from your little line.
I'll talk about the little girl that's right there. This actually represents where I come from in Brazil, actually Afro-Brazilian. So this is like the signature of where they're selling, our food. So that's how they dress. So I thought that it would be very nice to combine that, with the butterfly and everything, because at the end of the day, I feel like all of us go through certain, issues that make us glow into a butterfly. So that's the whole thing about it, yeah.
Andrea, would you like to go next?
Sure. So for me, I want to talk about the "you are healing" last little piece in the second to last line. So I feel like being able to participate and exist in post-secondary spaces has allowed me to have that sense of belonging that Liz has mentioned, and not only being able to just be a total nerd and savor the love of learning, but also when you're in post-secondary education, you can access mental health services and other resources that the university provides, and the access barriers are lowered because you only need to provide your student ID card or a student ID number. So I find that that has made me feel like a complete person instead of just this category of you are lacking status.
Fatima?
For me, I think I'm gonna highlight the first two. The first image is an image I created because I think, or at least people tell me I should consider myself as an artist. But when I was precarious, I wasn't able to go to school after high school. I wasn't able to get into university because I lived in Ottawa, and sadly, Ottawa doesn't have sanctuary scholar programs. And even if they had, I wouldn't have the money because, again, being precarious is something very hard. So for me, what was very big was art in general. So I would start learning how to draw, how to make art, and also through that drawing, I was able to create some kind of comic series for S4 themselves from a perspective of someone who is going through precarious situations, how they are navigating, how they are learning, what their status is, and how they are connecting with their parents and talking with their parents. So that's a little series that's on our Instagram. And then the second image is an art piece that I made. I was part of a Muslima an artist cohort, and that piece for me means a lot because it represents mental health, and mental health is a really big thing, especially when you're going through being precarious. So it kind of represented darkness and light, as you can see, and I would say S4 and being in a community with S4 really helped me realize that I'm not the only one, especially when you're precarious. You don't tell anyone what's going on because you are afraid. But being part of S4 really is something special because you don't have to be afraid to share what your experiences are. You don't have to share your experiences. You don't have to share your status. You don't have to fill in a form. You don't have to do all that kind of stuff. So having someone that you can fall back onto, someone you can talk your experiences about without the fear of someone judging you is very, very special. And that's kind of what this art piece represents. And then the rest are just me learning how to navigate the world after being able to get my status, going back to university, getting to know myself, being adventurous, and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you so much, y'all, for sharing. I do feel like it's a lot of navigating. As sanctuary scholars, we're not only navigating the education system, we're also navigating immigration, we're navigating social interactions with folks who we might not feel safe. So it's a lot of oh, do I trust you enough to tell you, or am I just gonna pretend that it's not happening? But yeah, fun stuff. The main reason why I wanted, or when we started talking about our panel for the youth conference, and why I wanted us to have a little bit of a conversation with the panelists is because I knew that my colleagues were going to do a lot of research and they were going to present on their findings. And that data is super, super important as service providers because, as you may already know, the government of Canada does not keep track of folks who are facing precarious immigration status or who get lost between the cracks of the system. And a lot of the times we are made to feel like we are put in the shadows, right? Like we don't exist. And we're here. We're part of the community. We are your friends. We're your neighbors. We're your family members. And we want that to change. We want you to know that we exist, but also that we have a lot of agency, that all the work that we have done comes from our knowledge, our experience, and to various support systems that we have had in place. So I wanted to invite our panelists to share a little bit about their experience with a couple of questions, just to understand that we do have power in the things that we are doing, and to have this kind of space to open up a platform for Sanctuary Scholars, because that is our main goal, to make Sanctuary Scholars visible, to know that we exist, and to know that we deserve just the same things as any other scholar does. The same struggles, but also the same triumphs, the same delicious feeling of graduating or having friends or having a safe space where you can share your experiences with. So I do have some questions for our panelists. And one of the biggest one that I have for you guys is, you know, as we get involved with S4 and access to education, can you guys define what equitable access to education means to each one of you? I guess, Janina, we can start with you.
Okay, so for me, it means that ensuring that every student, like no matter where they come from, what their status is, any circumstance of life, or even where they live, like these things shouldn't be a problem for them to be able to access education, because you know, it's very important that we all have access to education. Yeah.
So going back to what Janina said, in addition to that, to me, equitable access to education means that you're able to be in these classrooms and speaking your mind and having people hear what you have to say, and the contributions, and just expanding your worldview and sort of how you can get back to your community and not having shackles, perhaps, in being able to exist in these spaces.
And to add on to that, basically to me it means having no barriers, just being able, like your high school peers, being able to go to university like right after high school if that's what you choose to be to do, and also just being able to financially support that education with like OSEP loans or all that stuff. Just like make it a human right. Like I know elementary and secondary is considered human rights and post-secondary isn't, but education is still education, and we want everyone to have the choice to go wherever they want to without having those barriers.
Thank you so much for sharing, y'all. And I know that you folks hit on overcoming those barriers, and we know that with the implementation of Sanctuary Scholars, we have different experiences enrolling in university, but can you maybe talk about your personal experience as to why those Sanctuary Scholar spaces are important, or as to why universities should implement Sanctuary Scholars programs?
I guess, well, no, I guess. I know for a fact, yeah, I know for a fact that not being able to access post-secondary education puts you in a loop where you're like, if you're here in Canada, right, and you're in high school, you're like, why should I be here? Like, why should I even finish high school? Which makes you not even want to finish high school. And therefore you are in that loop of like 5-7 years trying to finish high school, and more if you are alone here, because there are a lot of unaccompanied minors that are undocumented, and like we have to work, right? We have to make ends meet, we have to do all of these things, and then there's the barriers of not even being able to go to university. So how are you supposed to even go up in life when there are so many systematic barriers? So I feel like these things need to be addressed, and people need to like care for each other, because it can happen to any of us. You know what I'm saying? Like, it can happen to a European, it can happen to an Asian, it can happen to an African, it can happen to any of us. Even a Canadian that goes to America, or a Canadian that goes to Brazil. If you go to Brazil, you have no status, you're not gonna have any access to anything neither. But that's also like something that we need to change, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and it's humanity, right? Like, we need to be there for each other. So that's my take on it, yeah.
So what Janine is saying of just essentially being able to exist as a human, and I think that these Sanctuary Scholars programs in universities are critical, because you can feel that you don't have to hide any part of yourself or somehow pretend that you don't have any basic needs. So for example, I know that in the past when I was undocumented, being able to go to university and having access to the health center and not having to pay like super crazy fees was really critical when inevitably you get sick and things happen. So in addition to being able to study also having your needs met or consulting with like the legal clinic at the university and just knowing your rights. Because as people have mentioned here today, knowing your rights allows you to advocate for yourself and not just be in this loop that you don't know what's happening.
For me, these spaces are very important because as a mature student, there is this feeling of feeling a bit ashamed that I'm a mature student because of something that I wasn't able to control. I know it's okay that I'm a mature student, but it hurts in a way, or like you're mourning the time that you weren't able to go to university because of something you weren't able to control. So that's something that mentally I struggle with, and like having that experiences if I know someone who is like very excited to graduate and they talk to us during meetings and ask about like resources what we can do, we're like super excited for them that they are able to be excited to go to university and stuff. But when we see that they have barriers, like for example financial barriers, we're like, yes, but, and it hurts when we have to tell them that they do need to have a backup plan. But it's just, if these spaces are like there for them to go to, it's just so much easier, and then that excitement can just continue. Like, yeah, go to university if you want to. If you want to take a year off, then go for it. But you have the choice to do what you want to do and not have to be forced by immigration, obviously.
Thank you so much for sharing, y'all. I did get the signal that we're running out of time, but just one last question. I wanted to ask if you could tell us why spaces like S4 are important to you, just shortly or whatever you'd like.
I think that it's very important to have these spaces, and also the importance of having people that been through those things as well, because at the end of the day, you cannot help somebody if you haven't been through it. You're not gonna understand that person's pain only if you've been through it. So the more you say, oh, I understand, okay, you understand, but you haven't been through it, so you don't fully understand. And you don't know how are you gonna help somebody that's been through trauma of these kinds, you know, and like, you can't really understand, you can't really help them in a way. And also I feel like the youth, we are the future. We are tomorrow's doctors, we are tomorrow's social workers, we are tomorrow's, you know, we are gonna be the ones that save your lives, if anything, kinda, right? So why are we silencing or marginalizing some people when it shouldn't be like this? Because the word is for everyone. It's not only for this kind of people or this kind of people, it's for everyone, so everyone should have access to everything. Because it's systematic barriers, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, why should there be systematic barriers when we have enough barriers daily in our daily lives? Yeah.
So in addition to having understanding, I feel like spaces like S4 allow you to have the safety to be able to share with people who get it, but also are not going to be telling the world, because it's not safe for people to be sharing your immigration status. It can be a really scary thing. So for someone to be like, I get it, truly what it means to hold that space and not share with anyone, is more valuable than anything, I find.
As a project coordinator, there is nothing better than being in a meeting with someone and just see their face light up when you tell them that they can go to university. Hearing them like double check with us, like, can I go to York or TMU? Can I do this program? And when we tell them, yeah, sometimes they just can't believe it, and it's like, yeah, it's true. So as for, we know, we have the experiences and we know how to talk to them. We know that sometimes you just need to get things off their chest, and we're there to listen, even if we go an hour over the meeting. But as a project coordinator, it's just that being able to support them in any way they need, connect them with lawyers or clinics that they need, tell them about the healthcare that they can access, which they didn't know about. So as someone who was precarious, you don't get the information and you're afraid to ask. So that's why places like S4, where you can go to and not have to be afraid to talk about your status, or don't have to go in depth if you don't want to, it's very, very important.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think that will be the panel for us. Thank you so much for listening to us. We do have a QR code set up to a resources page. If you are a service provider and you would like to connect with us, you could always reach to us by email. We also have Instagram where Fatima posts the comic that she mentioned a little bit about. We also post a lot of our meetings, resources for community members if you are facing precarious immigration status, or if you would like to know what the next steps are for you to continue your post-secondary journey or any educational journey of the sort, you can always contact us. And yeah, we are here for the community and by the community. Thank you guys so much.
I also did wanted to quickly add, if anyone knows any youth that is interested to go into post-secondary, we are hosting our What's Next night anytime soon. So if you want to connect with us and share the What's Next night, then please let us know.
Okay, so we are running a bit behind schedule. So we're going to go to our final part of our conference today, which is the final panel from people from all the presentations that we've seen today, and for them to just answer a few questions that we'd have. So from a Roadmap to Justice, we have Melissa Ombija. From Youth and... Yeah, you can clap. And then from Anti-Human Trafficking team, we have Tenzin. For Access to Education, we have Stefan. Woo. And for S4 Collective, we have Liz. Woo. Okay, so we're just going to do a mini panel for a few minutes and get you guys to answer a few questions that we had prepared for this. Okay, so please introduce yourselves and explain what you do in the specific projects. I know some of you presented, some of you didn't. And I think the two major questions that we're going to cover today is, how do your projects, or the projects that you're working on, and S4 specifically also, how are you guys engaging youth voices and youth experiences in your projects? And also, for what we've presented today, what is the next step for the
Shopper's
project?
Beauty
And the continuity. Who's playing a shopper's ad? And the continuity of your project. So what's the next steps? And if I'm interested, for example, let's say in the Access to Education project, how do I get involved? So we're going to start from Melissa.
Hello, my name is Melissa, and I am a youth advisor at the Roadmap to Justice project. And I've been a youth advisor for 2 years now. And in regards to the first question on how youth experiences are leading the project, so youth experiences specifically through youth engagement are what are informing the project. So within the Roadmap to Justice project, it is honestly co-led by a group of youth who have navigated the complexities of the immigration and legal process. So whether that be through the immigration or the settlement, the youth have knowledge on how it feels to navigate the system, as well as within the project, we've been able to conduct research and gain lived experiences of other minors who are actually currently navigating the system themselves. And we are centering their experiences and trying to use those experiences to create effective changes. As we know, the immigration system was not designed for young people or for minors. And so through youth engagement and youth-led groups such as A Roadmap to Justice, we're trying to center the voices of youth to drive policies, for advocacy, for mobilization. Yeah.
Okay, and what's the next step for your project?
Okay, so far we've done groundbreaking work for the past 2 years. We've been able to collect data. We've been able to, we have lived experience from the research committee, and currently we just finished working on a action implementation plan and a theory of change. So we are very enthusiastic about pushing to implement the changes that we have worked so hard to advocate for. And so we want to implement these changes through partnership and collaboration with organizations who are doing similar projects who are trying to address the barriers, such as, education with S4 Collective, in terms of mental health support and vulnerability with Youth Alliance Against Human Trafficking, and with the Youth Network as well, FCJ Youth Network, and access to education as well. So, and among other issues such as housing. Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's go on to S4.
I hope you didn't forget my name already. I'm Liz. Just saw me like 5 seconds ago. Yeah, so how we center youth is this group is led by youth. We are the ones with the lived experience who get to share our stories. We wanted from the very beginning to create a platform for folks to use their personal experience to guide policy change and decision making. A lot of the times when we're undergoing an immigration system, we don't have a lot of power, we don't have a lot of agency, especially like my colleagues talked about in the past. If you don't know what the immigration system is like, if you don't know what your lawyer is referring to with all this legal terminology, we want an opportunity for folks to know their rights, but also know that they do have a power over their own resources. Like I said, a lot of the work that we do is led by sanctuary scholars, so that means that myself, my colleagues, all the other members of this S4 collective have the lived experience of being a sanctuary scholar and facing barriers when accessing education, but not only facing barriers, overcoming those barriers. So that's how we center a lot of the youth experience, and we ask our partners to center our experience always, because a lot of the time we are asked for our credentials, and although some of us may have a university degree or a college degree, it's like, well, you don't have experience in social work. And I was like, no, but I was able to advocate for myself through an agency or a refugee claim, and I think that's very, very valuable experience that should not be put down by the system. In terms of the next couple of years, we have a couple of projects coming up. We're currently working with Toronto Metropolitan University with oh my gosh, there is a name for it, but we're recording the experiences of youth through photography, which we're super, super excited about, because we always want to have or give the opportunity to folks to talk about their stories through their own mediums, but also through their own perspectives. Although the immigration system is one system, we all go through it in various stages and through various different means, right? So like my experience will be very different from my colleagues or anybody in this room. So that's a little bit of the work that we have been doing. The Borderless Access to Education project is wrapping up in the next 3 years. We've also gathered a lot of data in terms of access to education, and what we want to do with that is to give educators the chance to know that, hey, these policies have been in place for 20 years. Why are there still gaps? Why are you still not enforcing these spaces for youth to access education? Why is this still happening, right? But more than anything, we want the youth to know the rights, because knowing your rights means that you have power and you can advocate for yourself, and you're your own best advocate more than anybody else. So yeah.
Perfect. FCJ Access to Education.
Okay, so for folks who were not here earlier, my name is Stefan. I'm the Youth and Access to Education Coordinator at the FCJ Refugee Centre. Definitely a lot of thoughts in my mind, but I'm trying to bring them all into some concise, coherent information. One thing that I want to highlight about the Access to Education program, and this is something that we try to do with all of our programs and projects at the center, is centering it around the value of walking with uprooted people, because that's sort of like our catchphrase with the center. And the Access to Education program itself is a testament of the work of the Youth Network. And so looking around the room, I see some familiar faces from when the Youth Network first started. It's sort of a graduating system, if you could say, in a way. Because there are folks who start with the Youth Network when they need the supports, and then they stay and remain with the network to sort of give back to the group, and folks who are new to the country, younger in age, and just feed into the different ways that they can bring some positive impact into the lives of people. The Access to Education program, or both of the programs actually are divided in the areas of case management, program delivery, and advocacy. And you see that everyone associated with each program becomes an advocate to their own stories in a way, but also to the community as a collective. With the Access to Education program, initially when this idea of an uprooted youth system for folks who couldn't go to post-secondary education had come about, folks who had that extra time because they couldn't go to school were tutoring and doing recreational programs for younger kids. So they were contributing to the younger folks within the community. They were teaching each other, uplifting each other until programs like the Sanctuary Scholars program came about and they could further their education. So in every facet of the work we do, youth are involved in some capacity. As a policy of the center, we make sure that there's a mandated position on our board of directors that has either a current or a former youth member and also one of the folks from our transitional houses. So you can see, even though we might look large in number, we are still very grassroots in the work that we do. And we make sure that the voices of the folks who need to be heard are the ones that are being heard. So that's sort of a summary of how youth are involved with our project and where we foresee the next steps of this sort of report card project component of the program. Is we will be doing 3 focus groups with folks who are sort of beneficiaries of the system, experiencing it firsthand. And we also will be organizing a roundtable discussion with decision makers and folks on the benefactor side of the conversation, who are the ones creating these policies, creating these procedures that folks have to navigate in terms of receiving the services. So that's what you can expect from us for the rest of this year. And as those conversations are directed and developed by the youth themselves, we'll have more information going into the new year.
Great. And last but not least,
yeah, so my name is Tenzin Kense, and I'm the Anti-Human Trafficking Youth Coordinator. We have a lot of parallels going on with Stefan, so basically we are from the same organization and our work practices are quite similar. But what we do differ is we have a steering committee, and as said before, like we keep the youth as the center of our most of our work, and we count their lived experience and their expertise at the top, and based on that we work around advocating for human rights and human exploitation and spreading more awareness on human trafficking. Yeah, and for our future of our work, currently it's the end of the 5-year funded project, which is funded by the MCCSS. But hopefully, I think we're in the process of renewing, and if it gets renewed, then we'll continue on our work. Even if it doesn't get renewed, I think FCJ Refugee Centre will keep keep to try to keep this alliance alive and working, and we want to keep collaborating with more other youth organizations and organizations that work with survivors of human trafficking.
Great. So a round of applause for our panelists, please. And yeah, so I think we are done with that part of a conference. And we are also done with our presentations for today. And I would like to greatly, greatly thank the youth who've been part of organizing this from the very beginning, and all the people who've been involved in all the meetings that we've had planning this from when it was just an idea to now when it was an actualization. So thank you very much, and thank you so much to Innis Town Hall. Clap for us. Thank you so much for Innis Town Hall for having us here, and it was great for you guys also coming here and taking the time to come and listen to the policy changes that we want to make and everything that we presented today. So thank you for giving us your ears too. And I was your host with the mostest, Tracy Mureithi, and have a good day.